The Galactic Council chamber resembled a cathedral crafted by civilizations that had forgotten gods but still worshipped hierarchy. Its vaulted arches shimmered with translucent alloys harvested from collapsed neutron stars, and the air, pressurized to accommodate over 100 species, buzzed with a low hum that made humans itch at the base of the skull. Ambassador Elise Marin entered precisely 4 minutes and 16 seconds late, holding a paper cup of something suspiciously resembling coffee. She smiled as she stepped onto the speaking platform, her heels clicking softly, her posture relaxed, like a woman who had accidentally wandered into a meeting of galactic overlords and decided to stay for the buffet. "Apologies for the delay," she said, her voice melodic and lightly accented. "We had a minor issue with the jump drive, bit of turbulence, nothing serious. Also, someone redirected our comms through a language filter. We spent the last hour trying to convince a vending machine that we weren't edible." Laughter, polite and condescending, trickled through the chamber. Not laughter with her, of course, laughter at her. Elise noted it silently, sipping her coffee with a hint of theatrical enjoyment. The flavor was awful. She drank it anyway. High Chancellor Vargok of the Zarkan Dominion leaned forward, his 12 eyes narrowing, his tendrils coiling around the diplomatic dais like bored snakes. "Human delegate, we welcome your species to the circle of the enlightened. May your contributions, however minor, benefit the whole." Elise bowed slightly. "We're honored, Chancellor. Though I must admit, being considered minor by a species that just discovered internal plumbing last century is quite the compliment." An uncomfortable silence fell. Somewhere, an avian diplomat choked on his plum nectar. Vargok's lower mandibles twitched. "I believe you requested an audience regarding border incidents." "We did, yes." Elise nodded, setting her cup on the glowing interface panel before her. "Specifically, we wanted to address the Zarkan exploratory fleet that trespassed in the outer Sol system, near Neptune's orbit. A rather sensitive area for us." "Ah," rumbled a voice from the left. Counselor Jix VI of the Coral Collective rotated his thorax segments thoughtfully. "You refer to the neutral zone? That sector is not claimed by any recognized galactic entity." "True," Elise said smiling, "but we've marked it. With very large signs. You know, the kind that say, 'Do not enter, seriously don't.' And if we did," Vargok leaned forward, "then we'd politely ask you to leave." Elise folded her hands. "And if you refused, we'd politely ask again. Once." That word hung in the air like a blade. Once. Several species with stronger senses of intuition or shorter historical memory fidgeted uncomfortably. The Dreamery ambassador, a translucent being of shifting hues, murmured something to their aide. The aide glanced at Elise, then at the exit. Vargok scoffed. "Your planet is barely post-planetary. You do not have the infrastructure to pose a threat. We investigated your capabilities. Your military expenditures are comically low." Elise tilted her head. "Yes, we found weapons a poor substitute for planning. Funny how that works. You claim territory without force." "An absurdity," Jix added, clicking his mandibles in a rhythm that his species used to signal skepticism. "By such logic, any species could simply claim a star system by being the loudest." "Or the smartest," Elise replied sweetly. At the periphery of the chamber, a small drone captured the meeting for historical record. Elise made sure to adjust her angle slightly, ensuring the lens captured her best side. She'd learned long ago that history didn't remember the truth. It remembered good lighting and strong delivery. "We're not here to posture," she said, projecting just enough weariness to sound diplomatic. "We came to extend goodwill and to issue a friendly request. Please stop sending your ships near our borders. We've been patient." Vargok's chest plates rippled with amusement. "Is that a threat, Ambassador?" "Oh, heavens no," Elise said, eyes wide with mock innocence. "It's a courtesy. A threat would come after. This is the nice part." Snickers. This time not quite as unified. A few counselors studied her a little more closely now, re-evaluating. Somewhere in the chamber, an aide began quietly typing notes. "Humanity is new," Jix said after a pause. You must understand the protocols. You do not yet have a voice here." Elise shrugged. "That's fair. But it's worth noting, no one gave us a voice on Earth either. We just spoke louder." The Dreamery ambassador rose slightly, their form pulsing with lavender hues. "If I may, my people have sensed vibrations from the soul system. It would be unwise to assume too much based on surface readings." Vargok waved a claw dismissively. "Your kind mistake shadows for meaning. These primates are clever apes with shiny toys." "And you're a lizard with a crown," Elise muttered, not quite quietly enough. Chairs creaked. The air seemed to tighten. "Enough," Vargok growled. "Let us end this farce. We will continue our explorations. Your claims are irrelevant until validated by galactic consensus." Elise sighed. "Understood. Then I suppose we'll validate them ourselves." "By what means?" Jix asked. She smiled again. "However many it takes." The council dismissed the Earth delegation shortly after that, formally with applause, informally with barely stifled smirks. Elise shook a dozen hands, bowed, nodded, even kissed one gelatinous cheek, all while cataloging the room's exits, security drone patterns, and body language of the dozen most influential counselors. Back in the hallway, her aide, Martin Reese, fell into step beside her. "Well, that could have gone worse." "Yes," Elise agreed. "If we'd accidentally declared war." "We didn't, right?" "No. We promised retaliation in vague terms couched in courtesy. It's a diplomatic art form." Martin glanced at her. "You really think they'll send another fleet?" Elise didn't answer right away. She pressed her thumb against a discrete pad near a maintenance panel. A moment later, a data chip slid into her palm, warm and humming. "They already did," she said. 38 hours ago. No response from them since they entered Neptune orbit." Martin paled. "Did we do something?" "We did what any polite species would do." Elise pocketed the chip. "We asked them not to come. Once." Back in the chamber, Vargok consulted with his staff, already preparing the next fleet. A minor expeditionary force. A show of dominance. Nothing major. He barely spared another thought for the humans. The Dreamery ambassador remained seated long after the others had left. Their form dimmed to a pale, trembling blue. One of their aides approached hesitantly. "Should we leave, Elder?" "No," the ambassador whispered. "Not yet. I wish to remember this silence. It will not return again for a very long time." That evening, Elise Marin stood aboard the diplomatic service vessel, Curious Bastard, looking out over the curvature of Earth. She held a glass of something that tasted better than coffee and watched as red indicator lights flickered across the orbital display. The fleet was gone. The Zarkan ships had entered the solar system, and then, quietly, disappeared. No transmissions. No escape pods. No wreckage. She tapped the side of her glass. "You think they got the message?" Martin asked. She turned to him, eyes reflecting the distant burn of a dying star on the screen. "They laughed, Martin. That's how it always starts." "And how does it end?" She didn't smile this time. "They stopped laughing." A soft ping echoed through the ship's comms. A diplomatic courier message had arrived. Elise opened it casually. Council Resolution 992.7. Denial of human territorial claim. Request for continued observation. Status. Non-threatened species. She raised her glass. Cheers to that. Below, Earth rotated quietly. Peaceful. Bright. Alive. And very, very ready. Commander Thursday Vax of the Zarkan Dominion had studied war for over 2 centuries. He had conquered 9 planets, overseen the indoctrination of dozens of subjugated species, and could field strip a plasma lance blindfolded. He once silenced an insurgent uprising using only a psychological operations team and a well-timed eclipse. He did not rattle easily, and yet, stepping onto Earth's soil for the first time, amid autumn wind and leaves that crunched like ancient bones beneath his talons, he felt unsettled. The human delegation that greeted him at the starport was small, informal, and smiling far too much. A bearded man with reflective glasses offered him a handshake. Thursday Vax declined. A woman stepped forward instead. She was slim, with sharp cheekbones and a softness around her eyes that seemed practiced. Elise Marin. He knew her face from files. Earth's senior diplomat. Trouble, wrapped in charm. "Commander," she said with an easy, measured voice, "welcome to our little blue marble. I hope your trip was uneventful." He grunted. "My ship's artificial gravity failed during orbital entry. We struck turbulence. My adjutant suffered bruised cartilage." "That's terrible," Elise said, eyes wide with sympathy. "We'll have a fruit basket sent to his room." Thursday Vax blinked. "A what?" "Apology fruit. It's a tradition. You'll love pineapple." He didn't respond. He didn't know how. They escorted him through a city of angles and glass, passing structures that looked unassuming, civilian. There were no guard towers, no orbital cannons on display. Humans walked dogs and argued over sandwiches. Children ran past, laughing, trailing drones behind them like digital kites. It was infuriating. Thursday Vax had expected bluster, military parades, or, at the very least, a minor attempt at intimidation. Instead, they gave him normal. That night, he was treated to a formal dinner in the Earth Embassy Sky Lounge. The view rotated slowly, showcasing constellations unfamiliar to Zarkan eyes. Elise Marin presided over the table, like a queen in casual exile. The meal included items labeled steak, asparagus, and something called red velvet cake, which he suspected was some kind of neurochemical trap. The wine was served in crystal glasses that refracted light like weaponized gemstones. "I must commend your hospitality," Thursday Vax said, cautiously sipping from his glass. "It's almost as if you are trying to disarm me." "Oh, we wouldn't dream of it," Elise said, slicing her steak with eerie precision. "You're far too valuable armed. So much easier to spot that way." He studied her. "I've read the reports. You destroyed a Dominion fleet. No trace. No survivors." "Fleet?" she asked, tilting her head. "Oh, you mean the ones who wandered too close to Neptune? We assumed they got lost. Solar storms can be so unforgiving." "Do not patronize me." "I wouldn't dare," she said. "Patronizing someone who can't recognize a trap when they step into it would just feel rude." Thursday Vax's talons scraped the table's edge. The sound was intentional. "You play at politics like children dress up in their parents' armor." Elise met his gaze. Her smile deepened, just slightly. "Children are very good at pretending, Commander. Sometimes they pretend so long they forget it was pretend. And sometimes they stop playing." The room chilled. He retired early. In his quarters, he replayed the dinner conversation 3 times. There was no overt threat, no declaration, only wordplay, smiles, and subtle hooks meant to plant themselves in his mind and grow thorns. The next day, Thursday Vax visited several human installations under the guise of diplomatic inspection. Each was innocuous: communication centers, research labs, cultural museums. Too innocuous. At a data hub in the Mojave sector, he asked about encryption protocols. The technician, a woman with dyed purple hair and a shirt that read sarcasm, "My first language," handed him a decryption key for transparency. The key opened nothing. At the orbital traffic station above Earth, he inquired about satellite defense systems. He was shown a museum exhibit on Sputnik, then handed a souvenir pin. It beeped once in his pocket before shutting down completely. At every step, he was deflected with charm, distracted with humor, and denied nothing, while receiving nothing real. He realized, with a twist of his gut, that he was not being inspected. He was the one being observed. On his 3rd day, he attended a human performance at something called an improv comedy club. It was a dimly lit room filled with laughter, drinks, and what appeared to be strategic, psychological experimentation disguised as humor. The performers on stage told stories laced with sarcasm, double meaning, and references to events no outsider could fully understand. "They're teaching each other how to lie," Thursday Vax murmured to his aide. "No," the aide whispered, pale. "They're practicing how to say the truth and not get caught." On the 5th day, he received an encrypted transmission from Dominion High Command. "Observe and evaluate. Do not provoke. Use restraint." He reread the message twice, then deleted it. That night, he wandered Earth's surface alone, trying to understand what disturbed him most. The humans were kind, polite, funny. They offered every courtesy and extended every hand. They even sent him a pineapple, whatever that was, for his injured adjutant. And yet, the core of it remained. They didn't feel peaceful. They felt like a spring coiled too tightly, like glass before shatter. Every conversation was a dance around a blade he couldn't see. He finally requested an audience with Marin in private. They met on the roof of the embassy under a sky blooming with stars. "I've observed your people," he said, walking the perimeter. "I've seen no weapons, no deployments, no aggression. Wonderful. We do love our peaceful image. And yet," he said, stopping, "I've felt more danger here than on the battlefields of Gorthal. I can't prove it, but it's there, like breathing smoke you can't see." "Perhaps," she said, stepping closer, "you're mistaking readiness for threat. Are you preparing for war?" "No," she paused, then added, "We're always prepared for war. But that's not the same." "Your fleet?" "Still missing, yes. Perhaps they got bored and left." Thursday Vax turned. "Why do you pretend to be weak?" "Because being underestimated is useful," she said. "Because being pitted is strategic. Because if we came in loud and angry, we'd be treated like a threat. You are a threat." Elise's voice turned soft. "Only when necessary." For the first time, Thursday Vax looked at her not as a diplomat, but as something far more dangerous. A tactician. A soldier in silk. A predator with patience. She smiled. It was not a human smile. It was the smile of a thing that could destroy, but had chosen, for now, not to. When he returned to his quarters that night, he found his adjutant sitting stiffly on the edge of his bed, holding a datapad. "Sir," the adjutant said, voice strained, "our network has been penetrated. Stealth access points across 5 Dominion systems. We trace them back to Earth, to schoolchildren playing a planetary hacking game." Thursday Vax closed his eyes. "I believe," the adjutant continued, "they weren't trying to infiltrate. I think they were sending us a message." On his final day, Elise walked him to the launch pad herself. The winds had picked up, tossing her hair around her face in messy waves. "You'll be reporting back, I assume," she said. "I hope you'll tell them we were nice." He studied her. "They will not believe me." "Oh, I know." She extended her hand. "Still, it was lovely having you." He took it. For the briefest second, her fingers tightened. A friendly gesture. But in that grip was the promise of steel. He boarded a ship and left Earth behind, but the sense of unease clung to him like scentless poison. When he arrived at Dominion Command, he delivered his report with clinical detachment. He stated that humans were strategically evasive, culturally unstable, and possessed capabilities disproportionate to their apparent technology. He was not believed. They laughed. They always laughed. 2 weeks later, the Dominion's flagship AI core suffered a cascading failure traced to a minor human weather satellite. Thousands of encrypted packets detonated across their comm system, disabling entire fleets for 16 hours. No one died, but everyone understood. The galaxy stopped laughing quite so loudly. And back on Earth, Elise Marin received a fruit basket in return. No note, just a Zarkan Talon, clipped and sealed in crystal. She placed it on her desk like a trophy. Then she smiled, very politely. In the annals of galactic diplomacy, there had never been a race quite like humans. Not because of their strength, many species were stronger. Not because of their intelligence, though theirs was formidable. It was something else. Something harder to categorize. Something wrapped in sarcasm and song lyrics, buried under friendly grins and self-deprecating humor. They were not warriors in the traditional sense. Not conquerors. Not zealots. No, humans were something far worse. They were strategic. And the galaxy was beginning to realize it far too late. The first mistake was letting Earth join the open network. It had seemed harmless at the time. A primitive backwater granted access to galactic traffic channels and economic databases. A diplomatic gesture to appease the dreamery and their incessant warnings about emotional consequences. a kindness extended to a species that spoke in movie quotes and printed sarcasm on t-shirts. No one noticed when the trade lanes flickered. At first, it was subtle. A few deliveries redirected. Some traffic jammed in quantum relay bottlenecks. The Zarkan fleet commander en route to drill exercises near the Gliese nexus never arrived. His fleet had somehow looped back toward the wrong star system, guided by a routine update to his NAV software that now refused to uninstall. Human technicians, when asked, offered shrugs and apologies. "We're still learning your protocols," they said. "Maybe your systems just aren't used to free software." It was the Greshtar Syndicate who first realized the implications. Their trade revenues dropped 11% in 3 cycles. When they investigated, they discovered that humans had, entirely by accident, created a highly efficient logistics algorithm. One that just happened to divert resource-rich contracts through Earth-based routing hubs. For efficiency, of course. When confronted, Ambassador Elise Marin replied, "Oh, that? We were just tinkering. Call it a hobby project. A little human curiosity. Funny how it snowballed, isn't it?" The Greshtar withdrew their complaint. They weren't fools. They saw the smile, and they noticed the teeth beneath it. In the council chambers, Vargok slammed a clawed hand onto the table, sending a brittle datapad clattering to the floor. "They are playing a game of obfuscation and smirks. I demand action." "You demanded action before," muttered the Quarrel representative without looking up. "And lost a fleet." "This is different," Vargok growled. "They're sabotaging infrastructure, hijacking trade, buying influence through sleight of hand. They're waging war with paper cuts and memes." "They call it soft power," murmured the Dreamery. "A name far too gentle for the damage it causes." Jix, the Quarrel, tapped his thorax with a claw. "We simulated over 4,000 responses. None of them resolve cleanly. The more we press, the more they adapt. The more they adapt, the deeper the entanglement." "They're smiling," Vargok hissed. "Smiling while gutting us from within." Council silence followed. And then Marin's voice. "Oh, dear," she said, stepping into the chamber as if she'd simply wandered in on a lark. "Did someone lose a fleet again? I brought muffins." She laid a basket on the table, unwrapping a neatly arranged array of baked goods. No one moved. "I thought we could all use a bit of sweetness," she said. "It's exhausting, this whole mutual coexistence thing. Wars of attrition are so dreadfully bureaucratic." Vargok stood slowly. "You mock us." "Not at all," she said, folding her hands. "I admire your consistency. Few species can lose so many assets without re-evaluating their approach." His eyes narrowed. "You admit sabotage?" "Sabotage." She blinked. "Oh no. We don't sabotage. We innovate. The results are incidental. You've hijacked trade. Optimized. You've rerouted information networks. Secured. You've compromised our defense systems." She tilted her head. "Have we?" His snarl was met with her smile. "I think," murmured the Dreamery, "that we should listen. If nothing else, they have mastered the art of surviving their own insanity." Marin turned. "Oh, we didn't survive despite our insanity. We survived because of it." Afterward, back on Earth, Marin stood in a situation room where the walls were real wood and the holograms were refreshingly low-tech. She ran a finger along the edge of the display, showing live movements of merchant fleets, patrol routes, and covert sensor webs strung, like spider silk, through half the quadrant. General Keating stood at her side, arms crossed. "They're starting to flinch." "They're starting to see," she replied. "You think they'll strike again?" "No," she took a sip of tea. "They'll hesitate. And that's when we take the next piece." The war wasn't won through battles. It was won through perception, through smiles at just the right moments, through a well-timed glitch in a Zarkan banking system that cost them 8 billion credits, through a children's show that subtly taught negotiation tactics using characters that looked suspiciously like Quarrel administrators. One episode even taught how to derail a bureaucratic motion with procedural misdirection. It was banned in 7 systems. Bootleg copies circulated like contraband. Meanwhile, human ships began accidentally appearing in disputed systems. Their captains, full of charm and coffee, apologized profusely for misreading the star charts. "But since we're here," they'd add, "would you mind if we set up a relay station? Just temporary, purely observational." None of them ever left. By the time the Empire noticed, there were over 40 such accidents. The final warning came not with an explosion, but with silence. Entire Dominion relays went dark. Emergency beacons activated and then cut off mid-signal. When Dominion forces scrambled to respond, they found their own gates rerouted. "Routing error," claimed the human help desk AI. "Please remain calm while we reinstall drivers." That was the night the Empire's outer colonies went quiet. Panic swept through the core systems. Messages flooded the council chambers. Vargok called for war. Jix called for analysis. The Dreamery simply wept. Back on Earth, in a bunker that didn't officially exist, Marin convened with Keating and several black-badged operatives. "All assets are in place," Keating said. "We've neutralized 80% of their predictive algorithms. By the time they realize what's happened, they'll be arguing about how it happened." Marin smiled, not kindly. "We're not just in their systems. We're in their heads." "They think we're laughing," one analyst said. "We are laughing," Marin replied, "but not for the reason they think." Keating nodded. "You're ready for the last step?" "Almost." She stood and approached a side terminal. A message blinked, waiting unread, from a Dreamery diplomat. It read, "We tried to warn them. We told them you were kind, and that your kindness was a mask. Now they listen. But now it's too late, isn't it?" Marin replied with a single line, "We warned them once." A few hours later, the final maneuver was executed. A coordinated deployment of deep space relays began to transmit a wave of disinformation, so densely structured it hijacked linguistic protocols in half the Council's AI. Reports became nonsense. Orders reversed themselves. Entire fleet chains read "return home" and "self-decommission" as directives for open retreat. Marin stood in her office, watching the chaos unfold. She wore a simple gray suit, understated, precise. Her smile was faint, measured, calculated. Martin, her aide, leaned in the doorway. "Do you think they get it now?" "No," she said. "But they will." Across the galaxy, the once laughing voices quieted. Humans weren't conquerors. They didn't need to be. They just played the game better. And now, as fleets floundered and systems rebooted without memory, and alliances scrambled to reassert meaning, one simple truth began to settle like dust in a dying starfield. The humans had never stopped smiling. They'd simply been waiting for the moment it would hurt. Silence had fallen over the Galactic Council chamber, but not the calm, reverent kind that followed ceremony or loss. This was the sound of predators realizing they were prey, of empires watching themselves unravel, while the architects of their collapse poured tea on the balcony. Elise Marin stood in the center of the room, unarmed, unaccompanied, and entirely unconcerned. The council members stared, every one of them seated in defensive postures, no longer masked by arrogance. They looked at her not as an envoy, not even as a human, but as something else entirely, an emissary of inevitability. She didn't smile. Not this time. The time for smiling had passed. "You wanted transparency," she said, her voice flat, almost casual. "So let's begin." A subtle movement of her hand activated the hollow display. Dozens of galactic systems lit up in soft pulses. Relay networks, defense grids, planetary trade nodes. Every major infrastructure point the Empire had spent millennia constructing. Every single one under quiet, total human control. No weapons had been fired. No planets had been bombed. And yet entire sectors were inert, isolated, stripped of their technological lifeblood. Jix the Sixth's mandibles clicked in disjointed rhythm. "How long?" Elise turned to him. 2 years. That's how long ago we began the full operation. Before that, it was just practice. The choral counselor slumped slightly, thorax twitching. "You told us you were peaceful." "I told you we preferred peace," she corrected. "We never promised we were incapable of war." The Dreamery ambassador, normally serene, now glowed a pale, despondent green. We tried to warn them. Tried to warn you. Oh, I remember, Elise said gently. You were the only ones who listened. Which is why Dreamery space remains untouched. Vargok rose slowly. His claws curled into the table. What do you want? She met his gaze without flinching. Control. The word landed like a kinetic strike. No frills. No masks. Just the truth, spoken with the clarity of someone who no longer had to pretend. Vargok bared his fangs. You think we will kneel? No, Elise said. I think you'll sign. She gestured again. The hologram shifted to show a document. Galactic Compact Revision 1H. Universal Mutual Oversight Protocol. An innocuous title for a document that handed political and technological stewardship of the known galaxy to a single regulatory body. A body made up primarily of human-appointed directors. The alternative, she continued, is that we let your systems collapse entirely. Within 3 standard weeks, your fleets will be grounded, your colonies unreachable, and your economic lifelines severed. A long pause. This is not war, Jix murmured, almost in awe. This is something else. It's victory, Elise said. It just doesn't look the way you expected. An hour later, aboard the Earth diplomatic vessel Curious Bastard, Elise stood by the observation window, watching the planet-wide feed broadcast from Council Prime. The revised compact passed with 23 votes, 7 abstentions, and only 1 objection. Zarkin, of course. Martin approached, tablet in hand. His usual wide-eyed curiosity dampened by the enormity of the moment. They actually did it, he said. They voted yes. Of course they did, Elise replied. We made them afraid. But more importantly, we made them tired. Martin squinted. Tired. Of guessing. Of losing. Of pretending we're what they thought we were. She turned from the stars and sat, the stiffness of exhaustion creeping into her shoulders. When you have enough power, you don't need to threaten. You just need to leave them enough rope and wait. Is that why we didn't fight openly? We never had to. War is noisy. Control is quiet. Martin hesitated. Is this what we wanted? She considered that. No. But it's what we needed. Across the galaxy, events unfolded like a final act written by a playwright who'd been playing a joke all along. Human ships, once regarded as clunky and uninspiring, now arrived as envoys of galactic standardization. Their presence was polite, helpful, calm. On Zarkin's 5th moon, a human diplomatic station replaced the former military outpost. It came with libraries, supply depots, and children's programs. On Greshtar Trade Nexus, all major financial exchanges were transferred to human-aligned quantum networks. Brokers grumbled, then adapted, then flourished. Even the Quarrel eventually integrated their decision trees with Earth-sourced logic modules. More efficient, more predictive. In time, everyone adjusted. No one knew how many systems had truly fallen under Earth's influence, because the truth was, it was never about owning systems. It was about owning outcomes. Months later, at a ceremonial gathering on Earth, Elise Marin hosted the first Interstellar Concord Gala. Dignitaries from across the stars arrived in careful truce. The air buzzed with diplomacy, pretense, and an undercurrent of resentment too weary to manifest. Elise stood near the edge of the crowd, swirling a glass of red wine and listening to a Greshtar delegate compliment the lighting design. She nodded politely, murmured agreement, and excused herself when the small talk thinned. Vargok stood alone by the fountain, eyes fixed on the sculpture of a human and alien shaking hands, eternally frozen in symbolic unity. She approached him quietly. No guards, he said without turning. No need. You played us. We warned you. I didn't believe a species that told jokes during negotiations could be dangerous. We've always used laughter to hide teeth, she said. You just didn't notice until they were too close. He glanced at her. And now you rule the galaxy? No, she said, sipping her wine. We govern it. There's a difference. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he asked, what was the plan, really? To be underestimated, Elise replied. Long enough to become unavoidable. He huffed, not quite laughter, not quite surrender. Well played. Thank you, she said, smiling, for real this time. We do have a flair for timing. As she turned to leave, Vargok called after her. Was this vengeance? She paused. No, she said. It was self-defense. With a punchline. In the silence of her private quarters later that night, Elise sat alone, finally letting the weight settle. Not guilt, she didn't feel that. Not regret either. Something closer to exhaustion with the world she'd helped build. The galaxy would survive. And now it might even improve. Standardized systems, stabilized trade, enforced cooperation. Humanity had become the binding thread of a civilization that once called them a punchline. But she knew the truth behind the curtain. Humans had always been dangerous. Not because of rage or ambition. Because of intention. Because beneath the jokes, they remembered everything. And now, so would the stars. The joke was over, and no one was laughing anymore.